Hi everybody and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra video. So today we just barely got the newest set of reveals for the upcoming expansion, Rise of the Underworlds. As you guys can see here, these are Bilgewater cards, and as we suspected, this is going to be part of Pyke's package, and he also has synergy with the Lurker archetype and Rek'Sai. So let's go ahead and start here on the left hand side with the first of these 5 cards. And we actually got 5 cards today. There are no token cards or anything here. They're all main deckable. 5 cards is amazing. I think this is the most we've got outside the variety reveal. Yeah, let's go ahead and look at this. So 2-cost Lurker, Redfin, Hammer Snout, Lurk, play. Grant an enemy vulnerable. Alright, so first things first, Pyke I thought was going to have some sort of challenge ability, but maybe he will just be a vulnerable granting champion. It's kind of like Sejuani. We'll see if it's permanent or not. I don't really know how expensive he's going to be. That might determine on whether or not the vulnerable is permanent. But yeah, it's got some vulnerable synergy all of a sudden with Pyke. So this is going to, like, Bilgewater already has quite a bit of that, so that's pretty cool. And then what else? Yeah, just the Lurk archetype. So we got, it looks like, a couple of ways that Pyke's going to be able to fit into decks. So he could potentially synergize well with Jarvan, with Renekton. There, I got it eventually. Jarvan, Renekton, just overwhelm decks, things like that. So we'll see what happens. This is just speculative at the moment, but it kind of looks like he's going to have some sort of vulnerable synergy. So a 1/2, grant an enemy vulnerable. It's a pretty weak stat line for a 2-drop. So for example, I think like some of his cost is going into this lurk mechanic. So we know that he's going to get more attack, but the health is pretty bad for a 2-cost, and just the starting attack and defense is pretty awful compared to something like the other 2-drop from Bilgewater that's a 2/3 that grants vulnerable. Um, it's just random though. This one is targeted, so I mean there are ups and downs to this. This is also a lurk card, so without another keyword, which makes this just kind of automatically a little bit worse because we're not going to more than likely be contacting the enemy nexus every time with this card, and he's easily chump blocked, easily taken out by spells and abilities, even if he's got a high attack stat. So there is a downside to that as well, but we'll see kind of how this vulnerable ability will synergize with Pyke. Alright, let's move on to this next one. A 1-cost burst speed spell. This is another lurk spell, which definitely is going to help the archetype quite a bit. Yeah, lurk spells in general. I wasn't expecting this. When we saw the spell yesterday, that Rek'Sai signature spell, I can't remember what it was called, but when we saw it yesterday, that makes the archetype a whole lot better when we're not just dependent on units, that we can add spells into the deck, which are necessary in the Legends of Runeterra decks. Most of them, 99% of Legends of Runeterra decks need spells, where we have a lurk mechanic that works with the spells. That's awesome. Definitely needed. Create a Snapjaw Swarm on the top of your deck. So we get a guaranteed burst speed lurk proc when we play this. This is great. This is really good. Now, the one downside to this is that to get the lurk proc, we are going down 1 card, right? Without a, I mean, it's basically like a buff all of your units 1 for 1 cost, right? Which, I mean, depending on what point of the game, is really kind of an investment. Late game, this could be kind of a burst speed finishing spell, which is pretty cool if you've got a lot of units out. If you got Rek'Sai out, if you're playing Rek'Sai with this, then this is a guaranteed lurk proc, a +2 with Rek'Sai out, which is pretty good for all of your lurk units. So this is a solid card. We're going to have to more than likely. So we saw like we do get some card generation with some of the spells and with Rek'Sai. But we may have to end up putting in a little bit more card production and drawing in this deck if we want it to work properly, because there is the potential of running out of cards and out of steam really quickly in this sort of archetype, especially if you don't end up leveling Rek'Sai, or if they've got a way to prevent that. I could just see us having a very limited hand. A lot of these spells are cheap. A lot of the units are actually pretty cheap as well. and this the potential to run out of steam really quickly is very likely. So there are some tools that they have available for us that they've shown us already. So, but it does appear as if we need a little bit of card draw and card production. So, yeah, but this is a solid card overall. This is going to probably be in most Lurk decks, is what my guess is. Just because it's a spell and because it's a Lurk and because we are guaranteeing Lurk. All right, let's look at this next card. A 0-cost slow speed spell, the List. This is obviously a Pyke card. This is Pyke's little hook thing that he's got, and he also has a list of names of people that he kills, I guess. People that have wronged him, something like that. Probably somebody who knows the lore a little bit better will be able to tell you better. But the List, a slow speed spell, grant an enemy vulnerable. If it's already vulnerable, the strongest ally starts a free attack, challenging it. So that's pretty cool. So this is another way, kind of like the Snapjaw Swarm, to guarantee an attack on your defending turn, or it enables you to attack on your defending turn, right? That's kind of where this is going, is what it looks like. It doesn't seem to be as efficient like on your attack turn, because there's only the possibility of getting one Lurk proc around, so that doesn't really matter. So this seems to be more geared towards using this on your defensive turn to try to get Lurk procs when you're not necessarily attacking. So very good. This is pretty good. We like this. This enables Rek'Sai and the Lurk procs a little bit better. Again, though, a very cheap spell that limits our hand and our ability to do things. So, I mean, yeah. You can see here we got 2, 1, 0, 1, 1. Very cheap cards. Very cheap cards. And you also have to remember that I'll have to look at, maybe they've got it on here. Let me look at this really quick. Yeah, they finally get it on here. Go down here. So Rek'Sai's Call the Pack. Create 2 random Lurker followers in hand, right? So there's potential to create these cheaper ones, which is both good and bad. So at like certain points in the game, we definitely want cheaper units, but then when we get later on in the game, we kind of want our finishing units rather than the cheap ones. So units with Overwhelm that can't be chump blocked. But overall, I think the addition of cheaper units is a little bit better and makes Call the Pack a little bit better as well, because you can you can use it at more times during the game for good value, right? If we're able to play a 1-drop immediately afterwards, or a 2-drop. So I kind of like the cheap units, but again, it's easy to run out of steam. So all right. Let's go on here to Ripper's Bay. When allies attack, discard the top card of your deck if it does not have a Lurk. That's interesting. All right, so we get this Lurk. Oh man, this is very interesting. It's a Lurk Landmark, a 1-drop Lurk Landmark. When allies attack, discard the top card of your deck if it doesn't have a Lurk. That's all right. So I'm not really sure how this works with Lurk. It's interesting. So, for example, when you attack, do you get an automatic Lurk proc if Ripper's Bay is out, or does it just discard the card for like, and that counts as the attack, right? The card that was there before it was discarded, or does it count the Lurk proc after the card gets discarded? We're maybe gonna have to wait to see how this actually interacts with the Lurk, because if it discards after you would have gotten or if it discards after you would have gotten the Lurk proc, and you end up not getting a Lurk proc, you put that card at the top of your deck, and then you draw it on your defending turn, right? And then it doesn't matter. Like then you draw a Lurk card, but you don't get the Lurk proc. So if that's that, maybe I'm confusing everybody. I'm not explaining it very well, but it kind of depends the ordering the Lurk procs. If it happens before we discard, then we won't get the Lurk proc. If it happens after the discard, then we will, which it would make it super strong, right? A really strong card, especially for the. But I mean, wouldn't you theoretically put in cards that help your deck that, besides lurk cards? I don't really know, like, if there's any, like, I feel like there's enough predicts and enough kind of lurk enablers that you don't really need to worry about the lurk procs at this point. So this is an interesting card. I really don't know how I expect to play this. Now, another interesting kind of side use to this is that we're discarding. Does that mean it will synergize with deep a little bit if we're discarding? So the difference, I guess, is that deep decks, they toss the cards, right? Rather than discarding. So in the toss case, they're obliterated from the game, and there's a little bit of a different interaction with Maokai and Nautilus when you toss the cards rather than discard. Now it does cycle to your deck, so as soon as you get to the 16 cards, or I think it's 16 that are needed to go deep, then your cards would go deep. However, there's no getting them back after they, because they have been discarded and not obliterated, which seems backwards. But Nautilus, when he levels up, he copies all of the obliterated cards of sea monsters that cost a certain amount. I think it's like 5 or more or something like that, right? So he copies them, the obliterated cards. These have been discarded, so it wouldn't really synergize in that way. But if you have cards that I mean, but then you would discard them. So I guess it probably wouldn't work that well with deep, other than initially getting there. This is actually a very good, like, I guess, precaution to make sure that Ripper's Bay does not synergize with deep super well, um, as a 1-drop. So just keep that in mind. Like, you're not obliterating, you're discarding, so it doesn't really work to level up Maokai. It does work to level up Nautilus, but he will not copy those cards that you discarded if they happen to be sea monsters, right? So actually a very good balance here between the deep archetype. So Pyke shouldn't be deep. I know a lot of people were kind of hoping that we got more deep synergy, but it looks like he's not going to. It looks like we're going to have some vulnerable synergy with him, and that may be it. All right, on to this last card here, the Sharkling, the last one, a 1-drop from Bilgewater. This is pretty standard here, a 1/2 with Lurk, so we're gonna get permanent health or attack stats on this card for a 1-drop, which is pretty good. It doesn't have any other keywords, so I think the Xerxes Hatchling from Shurima is just a little bit better, just because it's got the fearsome, so it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for units to block. One other thing that we do need to note here is that this vulnerable granting ability could be very powerful, and that we could, draw in. We can use a weaker unit to pull this a blocker potentially out of the way and be able to get a huge hit with our lurk unit. So this vulnerable, I don't think, should be underestimated. It's pretty good, and we can definitely expect to see that with Pyke, I'm pretty sure. I think that in a normal lurker deck, I don't know that I'm including this 1-drop. I think I'm including the Xerxes Hatchling instead. I think that we don't want a whole bunch of 1-drops in lurker decks. But the Lurk proc itself is nice. I think this card is necessary because of Call of the Pack, or Call of the Pack, whatever it is, where we create cards, right? It's nice to have a cheap lurker that we can play early on in the game. So while I think this is nice for that sort of combo, I don't know that I'm going to be main decking this, but I also think it's necessary, if that makes sense. So I'm not upset at this, but I'm also probably not including it in the deck. I'm not mad if I end up getting this card necessarily, especially in certain situations with Call of the Pack, and yeah, overall I think it's a pretty solid lurk card to have available. That's about it, I think. Did I miss anything, guys? What are your thoughts? Do you have anything else to say? Did I miss anything? Did I miss any potential synergies? Did I miss something with Ripper's Bay that you guys think could potentially work in a deck that I didn't see? Or any of these other cards. Overall, I think we're pretty solid here. These cards, they're very cheap. They're very nice cards. Oh, the last thing as well, apparently in the last video, or in the Rek'Sai video, there is an 8-drop Bilgewater card that we're going to see. Is that Pyke? Is Pyke an 8-drop? That's a pretty expensive champion card if it is. Well, I guess we're going to have to wait to see. I kind of hope it's not, because historically champions that come out late are not as good as champions that come out early. But it's not looking necessarily good for Pyke to be a 1 or 2 drop, or 3 for that matter, in the Lurker archetype, just because Rek'Sai's kind of in that spot already. It would be kind of weird, I think, for them to have 2 champions of the same archetype coming out at the same mana cost. So yeah, anyway, that's it. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks.